What if the month you've been dreading is actually the moment heaven has been waiting for? What if the heaviness you feel right now is not sadness but transition? Not everything that feels like an ending is a quiet as gone. December carries a weight that most people misunderstand because it looks like closure and it was actually alignment. You aren't you look back. Of that has been intentionally managing you from what no longer fits. One cannot run arrive until this season preparing you for something that cannot one was not in his life and when one loss and then one and most people misery are wrong. December is not proof that time ran out. It is proof that a cycle has completed its assignment. You survived what was meant to strengthen you, and now you are standing at a spiritual intersection. Your direction before your destination changes. If things feel uncertain right now, that if silence surrounding that is because it has had to be removed, and if you feel effort inside before anything looks different outside, it is because the shift has had to be removed. So your should be ready begun. Do not rush this moment. Do not mourn what is ending, and do not underestimate what God is quietly setting in motion right now. December is a spiritual intersection where God closes cycles and opens assignments, and this truth reshapes how time itself should be understood. Most people see December as a calendar conclusion, a numerical ending that signals exhaustion, pressure, and finality. But in the spiritual realm, December functions as a crossing point rather than a stopping point. It is the space where what has been running its course is brought to completion, and what has been hidden in preparation begins to receive definition. God works in cycles because cycles allow growth, testing, pruning, and maturity. And when a cycle ends, it is not because something failed, but because its purpose has been fulfilled. Nothing God assigns to a season is meant to last forever, because permanence would prevent progression and comfort would interrupt transformation. A cycle closes when it has extracted from you everything it was designed to teach, build, and refine. Many of the battles, delays, misunderstandings, and struggles experienced throughout the year were not random frustrations, but structured environments meant to shape endurance, humility, discernment, and obedience. December arrives as the moment when heaven evaluates the season and declares that its assignment has been completed. This is why there is often an emotional weight attached to this month, because the soul recognizes that something familiar is coming to an end, even if the mind cannot fully articulate it. God does not allow cycles to overlap carelessly, because unfinished cycles contaminate future assignments, and so December becomes the divine boundary where loose ends are gathered and unresolved lessons are brought to clarity. At the same time that cycles are closing, new assignments are being opened, often quietly and internally before anything changes externally. God never transitions a person without first repositioning their heart, because assignments are carried by alignment, not ambition. In December, God begins to shift desires, stir restlessness, expose dissatisfaction, and weaken attachment to what once felt secure. This inner disturbance is not confusion but preparation, because new assignments require new levels of surrender, vision, and responsibility. God introduces these assignments subtly, sometimes through persistent thoughts, recurring convictions, or an unshakable sense that you cannot remain where you are. The assignment is forming even if the opportunity has not yet appeared. December is also where God separates identity from activity. Many people confuse their assignment with their routine, believing that what they did is who they are. When a cycle closes, that illusion is confronted. God allows familiar roles to fade so that deeper identity can emerge. This can feel unsettling because endings remove structure, and without structure the soul feels exposed. Yet this exposure is intentional. God closes cycles to strip dependence on systems, people, and titles so that trust is recalibrated toward Him alone. Only then can a new assignment be carried without idolatry. This spiritual intersection demands reflection, not regret. God does not bring cycles to an end to replay your mistakes, but to redeem your obedience. Even seasons that felt unproductive were working something necessary beneath the surface. Roots grow in darkness, not in applause. December reveals that growth was happening even when visible progress was slow. God closes cycles with precision, ensuring that nothing essential is lost and nothing unnecessary is carried forward. What leaves your life in this month was never meant to survive the next assignment. New assignments often require unfamiliar terrain, which is why December feels like standing between certainty and mystery. God intentionally allows a gap between cycles so that dependence shifts from clarity to faith. Assignments are not revealed all at once because revelation grows as obedience deepens. December teaches you to move without full visibility, trusting that alignment precedes manifestation. This intersection is sacred because it is where God proves that time serves Him, not the other way around. What feels like an ending is actually divine timing converging with divine intention, where heaven closes what has finished its work and quietly releases what will soon demand your obedience. What looks like exhaustion is often evidence that a season has completed its work, even though the human instinct is to interpret tiredness as failure or weakness. Exhaustion carries a negative reputation because the world associates strength with endless energy and success with constant motion. But in the spiritual realm, exhaustion often appears at the moment when an assignment has been fully carried, when something has been held for a long time, when responsibility has been sustained under pressure, when faith has been exercised without visible reward. The body and soul naturally feel the weight of completion. This fatigue is not a signal to condemn yourself, but a confirmation that you have remained present in the process until the end. Many people become exhausted not because they avoided responsibility, but because they stayed. They endured when quitting would have been easier. They remained faithful when recognition was absent. They kept praying when answers were delayed. That kind of consistency costs something internally. Just as muscles ache after sustained labor, the inner life feels drained after a season of obedience. God does not measure seasons by how energized you feel at the end, but by whether the work assigned to that season was carried to completion. Exhaustion is often the residue of obedience, not the result of disobedience. There is a difference between burnout and completion, though they can feel similar. Burnout comes from striving without alignment, from carrying loads that were never assigned, or from trying to prove worth through performance. Completion exhaustion comes from fulfilling what God placed in your hands. In burnout, the soul feels empty and resentful. In completion exhaustion, the soul feels tired yet strangely peaceful. There is a quiet sense that something has been finished, even if the reward has not yet appeared. That peace is the witness that the season has done its work. God often allows exhaustion to surface at the end of a season because it prevents you from clinging to what is familiar. If you still had unlimited energy for the old assignment, you might resist the transition. Fatigue loosens your grip. It makes the thought of continuation less attractive and the possibility of change more acceptable. In this way, exhaustion becomes a mercy. It gently signals that it is time to release what you have been carrying so that you can receive what is next. God does not rip seasons away. He allows you to grow tired enough to let them go willingly. This is why December feels heavy for many people. It gathers the weight of an entire year into a single emotional and spiritual experience. All the prayers, disappointments, efforts, and hopes converge, and the body finally acknowledges what the soul has been carrying. This is not collapse. It is compression. Just as harvest follows a long growing season, exhaustion often precedes reward, even if the reward is not immediate or obvious. The field rests after harvest, not because it failed, but because it has produced. Jesus himself experienced exhaustion at moments of completion. After teaching, healing, traveling, and pouring himself out, he withdrew to rest. His withdrawal was not weakness but wisdom. He recognized that rest honors what has been accomplished. God does not demand endless output without renewal. When a season completes its work, rest becomes part of obedience. Ignoring exhaustion and forcing continuation can cause you to carry an assignment beyond its expiration, turning obedience into strain. Exhaustion also exposes the truth about what sustained you. When your strength runs low, It becomes clear whether you were operating in grace or in self-effort. Grace leaves you tired but intact. Self-effort leaves you depleted and fragmented. At the end of a season, God allows this revelation so that the next assignment can be carried differently. You learn to rely less on adrenaline and more on alignment, less on pressure and more on presence. What you are feeling now may not be a sign that you are behind, broken, or failing. It may be the body and soul acknowledging that the work of this season is done. Instead of resisting that feeling, it must be honored. Rest is not retreat. It is transition. The strength you are waiting for will return, but it will return for something new. Exhaustion is not the end of your usefulness. It is the evidence that you stayed until the assignment completed its work in you. God uses endings to reposition people, not to punish them. Even though endings often feel like loss, rejection, or failure to the human heart, when something ends, the immediate assumption is that something went wrong, that a mistake was made, or that God is displeased. This misunderstanding comes from equating permanence with success and change with judgment. In reality, God designs movement, not stagnation, and endings are one of His primary tools for relocation. What feels like removal is often redirection, and what feels like punishment is frequently protection. Throughout life, God allows certain chapters to close because remaining in them would eventually limit growth. Staying too long in a place that once nurtured you can slowly begin to suffocate you. Comfort becomes confinement, and familiarity becomes restriction. God does not wait for destruction before He intervenes. He closes doors before decay sets in. Endings, then, are not reactions to failure but proactive acts of care. God sees what continued attachment would cost you and ends the season before damage replaces development. Repositioning requires separation. A person cannot step into a new alignment while remaining anchored to an old one. When God ends something, He is loosening roots that have grown too deep in the wrong soil. This is why endings often feel abrupt or severe. Gradual detachment would give the heart time to resist. Swift endings reduce negotiation. God is not being harsh, He is being precise. He knows how easily people cling to what once worked, even when it no longer fits who they are becoming. Many endings come without explanation, which intensifies the pain. Humans crave closure, clarity, and fairness, but God often prioritizes movement over comfort. Explanation can delay obedience. If you fully understood why something ended, you might attempt to fix it, revive it, or renegotiate it. Silence forces trust. God does not owe detailed explanations for every transition, but He does ensure that every ending serves a greater alignment. Faith is exercised most deeply when obedience is required without full understanding. Endings also expose misplaced identity. When a role, relationship, or environment ends, it reveals how much of your worth was tied to that structure. God allows this exposure not to shame you but to free you. Identity rooted in assignment rather than in God becomes fragile. When the assignment ends, the person feels erased. God ends seasons to remind you that you are not what you do, who you serve, or where you belong. You are who He says you are, and that identity must be secure enough to move when He calls. There are times when people interpret endings as spiritual rejection, assuming God is removing His favor. In truth, favor often increases before repositioning. Just as a chess piece must be lifted before being placed in a more strategic position, God lifts people out of certain situations so they can be positioned where their influence and impact will matter more. The lifting feels like loss only because the new square has not yet been revealed. God never demotes without intention. He repositions for effectiveness. Endings also protect you from carrying expired assignments into future seasons. What was once grace can become burden if carried beyond its time. God ends things to prevent obedience from turning into strain. When He closes a chapter, He is saying that its weight is no longer yours to carry. Refusing to release it can lead to frustration, resentment, and confusion. Repositioning restores clarity by aligning responsibility with current calling. Even painful endings serve as divine course correction. Some paths look right, but lead to stagnation or compromise. God redirects by closing access rather than issuing warnings that could be ignored. Closed doors are sometimes the clearest guidance you will receive. When something consistently resists continuation, it may not be opposition but instruction. God steers His people by adjusting their route, not by condemning their steps. Repositioning through endings is an act of mercy. It saves you from becoming successful in the wrong place, attached to the wrong outcome, or loyal to the wrong season. God does not punish growth, He facilitates it. When an ending occurs, it is not heaven turning against you. It is heaven moving you into alignment with what comes next, even if the path forward has not yet taken shape. Silence in December is not absence but divine realignment, even though silence often feels unsettling to the human heart. When voices grow quiet, when direction seems unclear, and when familiar signals fade, the natural assumption is that something is wrong or that God has withdrawn. Yet silence is one of the most intentional tools God uses when preparing a shift. Noise maintains momentum, but silence creates awareness. God quiets the environment not to confuse you but to recalibrate you, because alignment cannot happen in constant motion. Throughout the year, life is filled with activity, demands opinions and urgency. Decisions are made quickly, reactions come easily, and distractions compete for attention. December arrives and many of those pressures suddenly slow down. Conversations pause, schedules loosen, and external expectations reduce. This slowdown is not accidental. God creates space so the inner life can catch up with the outer pace. Silence allows you to hear what was drowned out during the rush. It is in quiet moments that convictions surface and truth becomes unavoidable. Silence also strips away false dependencies. When voices that once affirmed you become quiet, you are forced to confront where your confidence was rooted. God uses silence to reveal whether direction came from His presence or from external validation. If peace disappears when applause stops, then alignment was never complete. Silence recalibrates trust, teaching you to draw direction from God rather than from constant feedback. This is not deprivation but refinement. Divine realignment often happens before visible change. God adjusts internal posture before He alters external conditions. In December, silence exposes misalignment that activity was masking. When everything slows down, discomfort rises, and that discomfort is diagnostic. It reveals areas where you were compensating with business rather than alignment. God does not rush to fix that discomfort because it carries instruction. What feels awkward in silence often points to what needs realignment. Silence is also where God reorders priorities. Without constant demands, you begin to notice what truly matters. Desires shift. Some ambitions lose their urgency, while others become more defined. God uses quiet seasons to reorder loves, because misdirected desire can derail future assignments. When the heart is noisy, it cannot be entrusted with clarity. Silence settles the heart so direction can be received without distortion. Many people associate God's presence with activity, miracles, and constant communication, but Scripture consistently shows God working powerfully in silence. Before creation, there was stillness. Before major transitions, there was waiting. Silence is not empty. It is charged with intention. God speaks most clearly when unnecessary noise is removed. December silence is not the absence of instruction, but the preparation of the listener. This realignment also includes emotional recalibration. When the year ends, unresolved feelings surface. Grief, disappointment, relief, and hope all rise together. Silence allows these emotions to be acknowledged rather than suppressed. God does not heal what is ignored. By allowing silence, He invites honesty. Emotional alignment must happen before spiritual clarity can be sustained. Suppressed emotion creates distortion, while acknowledged emotion creates openness. Silence trains patience. In a culture addicted to immediacy, waiting feels uncomfortable, yet waiting develops trust. God often withholds immediate answers in December to strengthen faith for what lies ahead. If direction came too quickly, dependency would weaken. Silence teaches you to move without full clarity, relying on relationship rather than information. This posture is essential for the next season. When silence stretches longer than expected, it can feel like abandonment. But divine realignment often takes time because it involves unlearning as much as learning. Old patterns, mindsets, and expectations must loosen. God does not rush this process. He values accuracy over speed. Silence slows you down enough to ensure that when movement resumes, it is aligned, intentional, and sustainable. The quiet of December is not an empty gap between seasons. It is an active space where God is adjusting your direction, refining your hearing, and aligning your heart. What feels like nothing happening is actually everything being prepared internally so that when the next season begins, you are positioned to move with clarity, peace, and precision rather than noise, haste, or confusion. Delays experienced this year were forms of preparation, not denial, even though waiting often feels like rejection when expectations are high and outcomes are unclear. The human mind equates speed with favor and delay with disapproval, but God does not operate on urgency the way people do. His concern is not how fast something arrives, but how well you are prepared to carry it. When God delays, it is rarely because He is unwilling. It is because premature arrival can damage both the gift and the person receiving it. Preparation is invisible by nature, which is why delays feel empty. While nothing appears to be happening externally, internal structures are being formed. Character, discernment, emotional stability, and spiritual maturity develop quietly. These qualities cannot be rushed, and they cannot be substituted. God values sustainability over spectacle. A blessing received too early can become a burden instead of a breakthrough. Delay protects you from being promoted beyond your capacity to remain whole. Many of the delays this year were actually answers in disguise. God responded not by giving what was asked for, but by shaping who you would need to be once it arrived. Some doors did not open because walking through them too soon would have exposed immaturity, unresolved wounds, or misplaced priorities. God does not delay to frustrate, but to fortify. What feels like resistance is often reinforcement happening beneath the surface. Delays also refine motives. When answers do not come quickly, the heart is tested. It becomes clear whether the desire was rooted in purpose or pressure, obedience or comparison. Waiting strips ambition of ego and leaves only what is genuine. God allows delays to purify intention so that when the blessing arrives, it is stewarded with humility rather than entitlement. Without delay, success can amplify flaws instead of calling. This year's delays likely exposed areas where trust was conditional. Faith is easy when outcomes align with expectations. Delay forces faith to mature beyond convenience. God uses waiting to teach dependence, patience, and surrender. These lessons are not punishments but prerequisites. Without them, future responsibilities would become overwhelming. God prepares the carrier before releasing the cargo. Delays also protect relationships and environments connected to your future. What you are waiting for does not exist in isolation. It affects other people's systems and timing beyond your awareness. God coordinates multiple elements simultaneously. While you feel delayed, others are being prepared, circumstances are aligning, and variables are being resolved. If everything arrived when you first asked, it might arrive into chaos rather than order. Many delays were also redirections. God prevented progress in certain areas because the destination was not aligned with your long-term purpose. Redirection often feels like stagnation, but it is actually course correction. God closes momentum in the wrong direction to preserve alignment. A delayed step can save years of recovery later. What you thought was slow progress was actually divine restraint. Emotionally, delays test resilience. They surface frustration, doubt, and insecurity. God allows these emotions to rise so they can be addressed rather than buried. Unresolved emotions become obstacles in future seasons. Delay gives time for healing, forgiveness, and clarity. God is not interested in blessing a version of you that is still bleeding internally. Preparation includes emotional restoration, not just external readiness. Spiritually, delays deepen intimacy. When answers are absent, relationship becomes central. Prayer shifts from request-driven to presence-driven. Trust matures when reliance moves from outcomes to connection. God uses delay to draw you closer, not push you away. In waiting, you learn His voice, His timing, and His nature. This relational depth becomes essential once the blessing arrives, because success without intimacy leads to distance rather than devotion. Looking back, many delays prevented regret. What you wanted urgently at one point may no longer appeal to you now. Perspective changed because time revealed truth. God delays to allow clarity to emerge. Desire matures, vision sharpens, and discernment increases. What once felt essential may now feel unnecessary, while what truly matters becomes clearer. Delays are not empty spaces in your story. They are chapters of preparation written in silence, patience, and growth. God does not waste waiting seasons. Every delay carried instruction, protection, and refinement. What was withheld was not taken away. It was preserved until the moment when you could receive it without losing yourself in the process. The shift begins internally before it manifests externally, because God always changes the person before He changes the environment. External transformation without internal alignment creates instability, but internal change prepares the ground for lasting results. This is why many people become frustrated when circumstances remain unchanged, even after intense prayer. God often answers by reshaping the inner world rather than rearranging the outer one. He understands that environment responds to identity, and identity must be refined before expansion can be sustained. Internal shifts often begin subtly. Thoughts change before actions do. Desires realign before decisions are made. What once excited you may lose its appeal, and what you once ignored may begin to demand your attention. These shifts can feel confusing because nothing tangible has changed, yet something inside feels different. This internal movement is not indecision, but divine recalibration. God adjusts perception so that future opportunities are recognized rather than missed. Without this adjustment, new doors could open and still go unnoticed. God works internally because inner alignment governs interpretation. Two people can experience the same circumstance and respond completely differently based on internal posture. God transforms how you see before He changes what you see. This is why internal peace often arrives before external resolution. Peace is not tied to answers but to alignment. When the heart is aligned, it can remain steady even while waiting. God establishes this stability first so that future success does not disrupt spiritual balance. Internal shifts also involve shedding old mindsets. Beliefs formed in previous seasons may no longer serve the next assignment. God gently dismantles limiting narratives, fear-based thinking, and survival patterns that once protected you but now restrict growth. This dismantling can feel uncomfortable because it challenges identity and familiarity. Yet, without releasing outdated frameworks, new responsibility would be filtered through old limitations. God renews the mind so that future blessings are interpreted through faith rather than fear. Emotional realignment is a critical part of this internal shift. Unhealed wounds distort perception and decision-making. God often addresses emotional health before granting external movement. Forgiveness, healing, and closure happen internally long before visible progress occurs. This ensures that when the next season begins, it is not contaminated by unresolved pain from the previous one. God prioritizes wholeness over speed, knowing that emotional integrity is essential for longevity. Internal shifts also recalibrate priorities. What once felt urgent may lose importance, while what truly matters becomes clearer. God uses this process to reorder values so that future opportunities do not distract from purpose. Without internal realignment, success can become a substitute for calling. God ensures that desire aligns with design before releasing new responsibility. This alignment protects you from becoming busy rather than effective. Faith itself undergoes transformation during internal shifts. Early faith often depends on visible confirmation. Mature faith rests in trust even without evidence. God develops this maturity internally before external breakthrough arrives. Waiting seasons stretch faith beyond comfort, teaching reliance on relationship rather than results. This depth of faith becomes essential when external changes introduce new pressures and demands. Internal shifts also strengthen discernment, sensitivity to timing, direction, and boundaries increases. God refines the ability to recognize what is aligned and what is not. This discernment cannot be rushed. It develops through reflection, silence, and obedience in unseen moments. External change without discernment leads to missteps, while discernment prepares you to navigate new terrain wisely. When internal shifts are complete, external change often follows naturally. Opportunities align, doors open, and movement resumes without force. What once required effort begins to flow. This is not coincidence but alignment in action. God does not need to push circumstances aggressively when the internal posture is ready. Environment responds to alignment the way doors respond to keys. The internal shift is the hidden work of God that makes visible transformation possible. It is quiet, gradual, and often unnoticed, but it is foundational. Without it, external change would collapse under pressure. God reshapes the inside so that when the outside changes, it lasts, remains healthy, and fulfills its intended purpose rather than becoming another cycle that must eventually be undone. As this message comes to a close, it is important to understand that December was never meant to be feared, rushed, or mourned. It stands as a sacred threshold where God completes what has served its purpose and prepares what has been hidden for the next season. Every ending discussed was not an act of loss, but an act of alignment. Exhaustion revealed completion, not defeat. Closed doors were instruments of repositioning, not rejection. Silence was not abandonment, but recalibration. Delays were not denial, but preparation. And the inner shifts you have felt were evidence that transformation was already underway long before anything changed on the surface. When these truths are seen together, December becomes a divine pause filled with intention, precision, and mercy rather than uncertainty or regret. God does not waste seasons, pain, or waiting. He uses them to refine vision, strengthen faith, and prepare hearts for what is coming next. What feels unfinished is actually being finalized in ways that protect you from future strain and misalignment. You are not standing at the end of your story, but at the edge of a new assignment shaped by wisdom, maturity, and clarity. Trust the process even when it feels quiet. Honor the transition even when it feels uncomfortable. What God is closing does not define you, and what He is opening will require the strength He has already been building within you. Good luck as you step forward with faith into what lies ahead. May clarity replace confusion, peace replace pressure, and courage rise where uncertainty once lived. Thank you for listening. May this message stay with you, encourage you, and guide you as you move into the next season with trust, strength, and confidence.